Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. The Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago. Party to formally nominate Kamala Harris as Democrat candidate for presidential polls. Day one highlight will be Biden's bittersweet farewell speech. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israel has accepted Gaza ceasefire bridging proposal, urges Hamas to do the same. Malaysian Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim arrives in India on a 3-day visit to hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. India and Japan to hold third 2+2 dialogue in New Delhi on Tuesday. Japanese Foreign and Defence Ministers call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of the ministerial meeting. Malaysia Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim has arrived in New Delhi on a 3-day visit to India. Now, this is his first visit to the country as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim will hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. During his visit, he will also meet President Draupadi Murmu and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Bilateral relationship between the two nations was elevated to the status of enhanced strategic partnership in 2015 during the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Malaysia. The visit of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim will pave the way for further strengthening of India-Malaysia bilateral ties by charting out a multi-sectoral cooperation agenda for the future. India and Japan will hold 2+2 ministerial dialogue in New Delhi on Tuesday. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and their counterparts will take part in the meeting. Ahead of the third India-Japan 2+2 foreign and defence ministerial meeting, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa and Defence Minister Minoru Kihara met with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Monday. The leaders reviewed the progress in India-Japan defence and security ties and reaffirmed the important role of their partnership in promoting peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. As efforts continue for a Gaza peace truce, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that Israel has accepted its bridging proposal, urging Hamas to do the same. The top U.S. diplomat met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv on Monday and described his talks with him as positive, adding that Netanyahu had committed to sending his negotiating team back to Doha and Egypt for a round of talks to try to complete the ceasefire agreement. Blinken will also travel to Cairo, where ceasefire talks are expected to resume this week. Democratic National Convention kicked off in Chicago, Illinois on Monday, with U.S. President Joe Biden expected to urge his fellow Democrats to unite behind Vice President Kamala Harris in the fight for White House. Biden's appearance to start the 4-day Democratic National Convention will serve as a symbol passing of the torch to Harris after he quit the race under pressure from top Democrats worried that the 81-year-old incumbent was too old to win or serve another 4 years. Earlier polls showed Trump with a clear lead over Biden, but Harris has closed the gap both nationally and in many of the highly competitive states, including Pennsylvania. The first day of the Democratic National Convention featured a surprise appearance by Vice President Kamala Harris. In her brief remarks, she thanked President Joe Biden for his historic leadership and lifetime of service to our nation.
I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
In a while from now, U.S. President Joe Biden will give his farewell speech in Democratic National Convention in Chicago. He said he is ready to pass the torch of election to the presidential nominee, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden's farewell speech is expected to be a snapshot on his contributions as President of the United States and his achievements during his long political career, which witnessed his remarkable climb from party worker to vice president and to the White House. Joe Biden reached the convention venue to do a sound check from the stage where he will give his final address to the party. Indeed, the speech will be one of the toughest moments in his political career as he had to step aside and make way for Kamala Harris as the presidential candidate. However, keeping his cool and smile intact on the face, Biden was moving around the podium meeting and interacting with the organizers and workers of his party. When asked, is he ready to pass the torch to Kamala Harris, he said yes, he was ready.
Excited to be here tonight.
How are you feeling?
Are you ready to pass the torch? Yes, sir. I am.
Meanwhile, 4 people were arrested after breaching the outer security fence of the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Police said that a small group of around 100 demonstrators broke off from a larger march involving thousands of people and targeted metal barriers surrounding the United Center on the first day of the party gathering. Protest groups have called for mass demonstrations throughout the week against Biden-Harris administration. All right, DD India's Benji Hire joins us live for more on the story from Washington. Benji, we've just given a broad outline of how Kamala Harris made a surprise visit to the convention. Get us more on that. What all did she say? Though we tell our viewers that she appreciated and was grateful to Biden for his leadership and service to the country.
Yeah, well, it was a short address only, but she was met on stage with a euphoric embrace from the crowd. And I think those sentiments will carry over to President Joe Biden's address in a couple of minutes' time. But I think the frank reality for the president is that every cheer that meets him, every fist that's thrown up in celebration that meets every phrase that he puts out about the need to defend democracy or passing on the baton to the next generation, all of those will be done with enthusiasm and relief for him being off the ticket. And now Kamala Harris topping it to take on Donald Trump in November. Ultimately, this is a stark contrast, I think, to the sort of speech that the president thought he might have been giving at this convention, a chance to cap a half-century career, to tout his achievements in office, to explain that he alone is the man to defeat former President Donald Trump. But instead, it's going to be a chance for him to push this narrative that he is passing on that baton to the new generation, and that will be a decision which defends his legacy. Now, on the one hand, that may very well be true, but on the other, I think the legacy will only be defended if it turns out that his protege and Vice President Kamala Harris can beat Mr. Trump. And I think the other interesting dynamic to look forward to in a few moments is the fact that President Biden will be giving this address at the convention, his 13th that he's attended, in front of the very individuals that were at the heart of the movement, the manoeuvring around removing him as the candidate for the Democratic Party.
All right, ironic that is. But then, Benji, also when we talk of President Joe Biden, his service to the country, let us get a quick word from you as to how would Joe Biden be remembered? Because from being a party worker to the vice president of the country at a time and now leading the nation as its president, he has had a long journey indeed. How will he be remembered?
I think very well in front of this crowd. I mean, you've got to remember that the delegates who are on the floor of the National Convention did vote for him as the nominee. They are widely supportive of his platform, but ultimately many Democrats just felt that he didn't have enough to beat Donald Trump in the US election. I think the framing also is going to be essential tonight, whether it will be a look back, talking about his time in office, not just as president, but as you say, a decades-long career in the rear-view mirror, speaking about basking in the successes that he's had, a sort of farewell address, or ultimately whether it won't be about his legacy, whether it will be about pushing forward this idea of giving the mantle to Kamala Harris and continuing with the sort of rhetoric that we've heard before before around Donald Trump being a threat to democracy, but we've seen that language be tempered by Harris's campaign and instead be replaced with this sort of overarching sentiment of optimism and joy, which we're being seen espoused in the convention centre in Chicago tonight.
All right, Benji, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those details. Meanwhile, U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump on Monday said that if elected, he would tap Elon Musk for a cabinet or advisory role if he would do it. Trump also said that he would consider ending a $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicle purchases, calling it ridiculous.
I would. He's very smart. I had a great talk with him the other day. As you know, it went on for 2.5 hours almost, and perhaps you listened, but he's a very smart guy. I certainly would. If he would do it, I certainly would. He's a brilliant guy.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Monday launched a new electoral consultation process to decide the allocation of funds for local community projects across the country amid escalating political tensions over an ongoing electoral dispute. The nationwide consultation will take place on Sunday and will allow communities to vote on which local projects should be funded by the government. However, critics say that the move is politically motivated. Venezuela's electoral authority said Maduro won 51% of the vote, although it has not released comprehensive vote tallies. Meanwhile, opposition tallies published on a website show that opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez won 67% of the vote. A group of unions representing Mexico's judicial workers launched an indefinite nationwide strike on Monday ahead of lawmakers' votes on overhauling the country's judiciary, including moving to the popular election of judges. The unions criticized the reform push in a statement as rushed and a danger to the only counterweight to the ruling Morena party's dominance of both the presidency and the Congress. The unions, who represent many of Mexico's 55,000 judicial workers, said that they believed the reform would end merit-based career paths. The judicial reform is a top priority of outgoing President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and is set for votes by the newly elected Congress next month during the leftist leader's final month in office. A quick look at other stories making it to the headlines from across the world. The first set of £1 coins bearing the portrait of King Charles III will enter circulation across the UK this week. UK's official maker of British coins released footage of the production of new £1 coins bearing the portrait of King Charles. Almost 3 million coins will enter circulation this week via post offices and banks across the UK. The city of Long Beach in the United States has been clearing homeless encampments following an execution order from California Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, this move came after a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in June upheld laws allowing cities to ticket and fine individuals living on the streets, giving municipalities greater power to enforce such measures. Advocates have warned that removing encampments without sufficient shelter could worsen the homelessness. Long Beach's 2024 count shows nearly 3,400 homeless individuals, a slight drop from last year. University in Peru succeeds in cloning native Peruvian horse, which marks the birth of the first clone of the Peruvian Paso horse. Researchers from a university in Peru use somatic cell nuclear transfer technology in the process. The purpose of cloning this animal was to preserve and reproduce animals of high genetic value. We're heading for a short break. You're watching DD India Live, but after the break, the Russia-Ukraine war continues with no respite in sight as both sides unabatedly exchange fire in the border areas. First doses of Mpox vaccine expected to reach Congo by next week, even as the nation copes with rising cases of the disease. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live. India's Ministry of External Affairs announced that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Ukraine on an official visit on 23rd of August. The MEA termed the visit as a landmark one.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi will undertake an official visit to Ukraine later this week on Friday, 23rd August, at the invitation of President of Ukraine, His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky. This also is a landmark and historic visit, since this will be the first time that an Indian Prime Minister will be visiting Ukraine in more than 30 years since the diplomatic relations were established between our countries. This landmark visit, of course, takes place against the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which will also form part of discussions. As you are aware, India has consistently advocated for diplomacy and dialogue to reach a negotiated settlement.
Further in the press briefing, India's Ministry of External Affairs said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Poland on 21st and 22nd of August on the invitation of Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi will be undertaking an official visit to Poland this week on 21st and 22nd August at the invitation of Prime Minister His Excellency Donald Tusk. This is a landmark visit as Prime Minister of India is visiting Poland after 45 years. The visit takes place as we also mark the 70th anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic relations between India and Poland.
The MEA also said that Prime Minister will be accorded a ceremonial welcome and hold bilateral talks with his Polish counterpart.
Prime Minister Modi will be accorded a ceremonial welcome in addition to the talks with Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Prime Minister Modi will also call on President Andrzej Duda. Prime Minister Modi will also interact with members of the Indian community, select Polish business leaders and prominent Indologists. He will also visit memorials that commemorate the very special episodes of Jamnagar and Kolhapur in our shared history.
The Russian-Ukrainian forces continue to exchange fire as their war of attrition goes on. Kherson incursion is going on, and Moscow says Ukraine has struck a damaged a third bridge in the Kherson region. Russia also said its Marines captured a group of 19 Ukrainian soldiers in the region. Dasha Chernysheва gets us more from Moscow.
Russia says after Ukraine's incursion of the Kursk region, there can be no negotiations with Kiev. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also said on Monday that the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was instructed by the US to attack Russia and to seek to create a buffer zone in the Kursk region, as Zelensky described it. Lavrov also said that Kiev itself would not have dared to do that. In the meantime, Russian Minister of Defense says it continues to attack the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region and within Ukraine's borders. In the meantime, Russia's Emergencies Ministry said on Monday that more than 120,000 people have been evacuated from 9 border districts of Russia's Kursk region. In the Belgorod region, the authorities limited the entry to 5 more settlements and promised to provide local residents with compensation for lost housing without additional expertise and administrative procedures. Russian media quoted the office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, saying it was ready to send a group of international experts to the Kursk region. In Donbas, Russian forces say they have improved their positions in a number of areas and took control over the village of Artemova, describing it as one of the area's major population centers. Dasha Chernysheва in Moscow, reported for DD India.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday called on Kyiv's allies to relax restrictions on the use of weapons acquired from outside sources. Zelensky said that Ukraine's attack on Russia's Kursk area showed that the Kremlin's threats of retribution were a bluff.
We are now experiencing an extremely important ideological shift, namely the entire naive, illusory concept of so-called red lines regarding Russia, which dominated the assessment of the war by some of our partners, has crumbled these days somewhere near Sudza.
The United States envoy for Sudan said on Monday that peace talks were in progress in Switzerland days after the announcement of the reopening of the country's Adria crossing with Chad. Sudan's Sovereign Council said late last week that it would allow the use of Adre border with Chad for 3 months, a move long awaited by aid agencies seeking to send aid into areas of Darfur region that are threatened with famine. Also, the US-led talks, which the paramilitary RSF is attending, aim to end the devastating war that broke out in April 2023 and address the crippling humanitarian crisis that has left half of Sudan's population of 50 million facing food insecurity.
First of all, I think the most important thing is that this model is working. We are actively moving forward in conversation with the Army and with the Rapid Support Forces every day, in fact, every hour, both as a team and as individual delegations. And we've been really pleased at the responsiveness to that. So while there are some continued issues of communication that we will continue to work on, the reality is that we are getting it done now because that's what the Sudanese people want.
A Democratic Republic of Congo hopes to receive its first doses of Mpox vaccine by next week, following promises from the United States and Japan to help it fight its outbreak, the Congolese health minister said on Monday. The World Health Organization last week declared Mpox a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years as a new variant of the disease spreads rapidly in Africa. Congolese Health Minister Samuel Roger Kamba on Monday said that Japan and the United States had pledged vaccines to Congo. Their arrival would help to address a huge inequity that left African countries with no access to the 2 shots used in a 2022 global Mpox outbreak, while the vaccines were widely available in Europe and the United States.
I sincerely hope that the vaccines will arrive next week, so I can give you a rough idea of the timing. I hope that the vaccines will arrive next week. You know, it's really a whole logistic chain from our acceptance first and then a few administrative procedures before shipment. But our strategic vaccination response plan is already ready. We are just waiting for the vaccines to arrive. We in fact written to Gavi asking them to make vaccines available to us. And we have agreed to this.
And now we get to a report on the outbreak of Mpox, which has spread from Africa to other parts of the world. Philippines has reported the first case of Mpox. India, however, is on alert and is ready to deal with any eventuality, though there have been no cases so far.
Just when Africa is battling Mpox, the Philippines detected a new case of Mpox virus in the country. This is the first since December last year. 33-year-old Filipino male had no travel history outside the Philippines, according to the country's Department of Health. One case of Mpox virus has been detected in Pakistan of the Clade 2 variety. Clade 1b has triggered global concern because it seems to spread more easily through routine close contact. A case of the variant was confirmed last week in Sweden and linked to a growing outbreak in Africa, the first sign of its spread outside the continent. The WHO last week declared the Mpox surge a public health emergency of international concern, its highest alert level.
There are some adults who prefer to go to churches to get prayed for instead of visiting health facilities. By the time they arrive at hospitals, the Mpox virus is at an advanced stage. That's the reason why we have recorded many deaths.
Let's now briefly understand what Mpox is, its causes and symptoms. Mpox is caused by the monkeypox virus. It belongs to the same group of viruses as smallpox, but is said to be much less harmful. There are 2 main types of Mpox, Clade 1 and Clade 2. A previous Mpox public health emergency was declared in 2022. It is most common in remote villages in the tropical rainforests of Africa. While 96% of Mpox cases are in DR Congo, the disease has spread to many neighboring countries such as Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda. Symptoms: fever, headaches, swelling, back pain and muscle ache. Infection usually clears up on its own and lasts between 14 and 21 days. Mpox spreads from one person to another person through close contact with someone who is infected. Virus can enter the body through broken skin, the respiratory tract, or through the eyes, nose, or mouth. It can also be spread through touching objects such as bedding, clothing, and towels, and with close contact with infected animals such as monkeys, rats. India has not reported any Mpox cases at this time. The government is taking comprehensive precautions to ensure public safety. Enhanced surveillance and monitoring are in place at key international entry points and healthcare infrastructure, including 3 model hospitals and an isolation ward in Delhi, is ready to handle any potential cases. The National Centre for Disease Control has completed its preparations, and there are 32 ICMR labs across the country equipped with Mpox testing. Importantly, there is no connection between Mpox and COVID-19, and individuals vaccinated against smallpox are considered at lower risk. Bureau Report, DD India.
That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. Now, this app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screens to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.